Hi everybody, I wanted to share with you guys today the build I've been using in SPvP lately. For a long time I've been playing the Sword Longbow condition damage build, and I also was playing for a while a Berserker Axe Bow burst build. And weirdly enough, this build is sort of like a hybrid merger of the two. So I thought it was kind of interesting and I would share it. I want to start off by saying I don't take really any credit for creating this build. Someone in my guild mentioned offhand one day that there's an axe longbow hybrid celestial build, and that it's an actual thing that exists. And I kind of laughed it off and forgot all about it and didn't really pay much attention to it. Then randomly, a couple weeks later in SPvP, I was defending a point 1v1 against a warrior who was running up. And I was playing condition damage, and he literally threw me in the dumpster very badly. It was a very one-sided fight, more one-sided beating that I've received in a very, very long time. So I was impressed. I went to spectator mode and just took a quick look at his build and saw that he was using a celestial axe bow build. Some of his trait choices I didn't really like, and gearing choices, but the concept of the build seemed really powerful. And after playing it for a while and tweaking it a little bit, this build that I'm going to present to you guys today is the build I have. Just a quick overview. The build is a hybrid power condition damage build using axe, sword, longbow. The idea is to apply pressure with conditions while building significant might stacks, followed by a big eviscerate when the target's under pressure. The direct damage is a bit lower than the Berserker Axe build, but it makes up for it with good condi pressure and fairly significantly more tankiness than the Berserker Axe Bow build. So next I will get into the build. So talking about gear, first and foremost, the build utilizes the Celestial Amulet. In SPvP, this amulet is pretty imbalanced at the moment. The ferocity from this amulet is nearly as much as the ferocity, as you can see, 434 from Celestial, as you get from the Berserker, which is 447. So you're only missing out on 13 ferocity by going Celestial. So the ferocity is almost identical. What you miss out on is a lot of power and a little bit of precision, but you gain extra toughness, extra vitality, healing power, which is meh, and of course condition damage. So when you do crit, the crits are going to be very close to what you would with the Berserker Amulet. The drawback is, as you can see, I only have 25 crit chance, so I don't crit as much. But we can fix that, and the build does address it. For the rune set, we use the Rune of Holbreck. I have seen people using strength runes with a build like this, and it's definitely a viable choice. But I find that when I'm using the Holbreck runes, I don't have to bring Dogged March as a trait to avoid snares. The Holbreck rune kind of solves the snare situation for me, and I don't feel like I'm sacrificing a great deal of offensive ability to get that. The might stacking that you get and the power from the rune set means that you'll frequently be above 20 stacks of might, which means that even with a Celestial Amulet, you're going to be hitting very hard direct damage, and you're also going to be hitting pretty decent condition damage at the same time with all that might. So how do we fix the low crit chance? We address that with our sigils. On our axe, we're going to have Sigil of Intelligence. Your next 3 attacks after swapping to this weapon while in combat have a 100% critical chance. Intelligence ensures that when we swap to axe, our eviscerate will crit when it hits every time. This is huge. The second sigil I use is the Energy Sigil. The Energy Sigil is optional, and it's kind of up to your preference. I tested in this slot Strength, Hydromancy, Air, Fire, and Geomancy, and all of those are good, and they're all definitely viable. But I definitely just prefer the Energy Sigil for this reason. The reason being, this build doesn't have Greatsword to whirlwind and rush away when a fight's going bad, and it doesn't have Main Hand Sword to do a Savage Leap away from combat when things are going bad. If you're losing a fight with this build and you need to get away, the only real way you have to get out is your dodges and your sword block, This gives you an extra dodge, which can mean the difference between life and death when you're trying to pull out of a fight that's not going very well. The extra dodge will increase your survivability, obviously. And just as an aside, one thing I've noticed as I've improved at PvP is that the energy sigil scales in usefulness with how good you are as a player. If you waste dodges on basically non-important attacks, or when a guy's just like auto-attacking you, or for nothing, the energy sigil's not going to do much, because the things that you're dodging with it aren't high-impact skills. But once you have a lot of experience in PvP, and you know the important tells to dodge, like an Earthshaker or a pin down from a warrior, for Heartseekers from a thief, and other high impact skills, and Ellie doing the one of the fire gap closer. There's really high impact skills that you can avoid, and once you know to avoid the high impact skills, Sigil of Energy becomes way powerful, probably more powerful than the other sigils, which is why I like it. It gives you a chance to outplay your opponents, and then I like that. If you're just getting into PvP, though, I would recommend trying something a little bit more passive, like Air for the extra DPS, or Strength, which goes very well with the Hullbrick runes to give you extra might stacks. I consider Sigil of Geomancy to be also quite good. The bleeds are extra pressure, and in this build, your bleeds actually do pretty decent damage. And Hydromancy is also good because it hits for about 800 damage, and it chills them for 2 seconds, which is pretty strong. But I would say the default should be Energy. On the longbow, Sigil of Battle primarily, very, very good. Combined with Hullbrick runes and Fast Hands, Sigil of Battle amounts to about 9 stacks of might, which is awesome. 9 stacks of might is a lot of power and a lot of condition damage, and it really is sort of the engine that makes this build work. The other sigil I use is Doom, and this is sort of a metagame call. Doom is very underestimated in the game, especially in a condition damage build, or a build that relies, at least in part, on condition damage. When you have a condition damage centric build, you inflict poison to help you win attrition fights because it prevents the opponent from healing as well. If you are against another warrior, you both are going to have healing sig. If your healing sig is healing for 33% more than his healing sig, if you're equally good players, you're going to win the fight just because your healing sig will be more effective than his. It's also really good against Ellies. It's really good against Engies, people that heal often and have a lot of healing in their build. So keeping poison on your enemy is a really powerful way to deal with them. But it's not good against every profession. You can play against a thief, and it's not really going to be that big of a deal. A Necro, you're actually helping him with his consumed conditions. And other classes like a Guardian aren't going to be too phased by it. So it's really a metagame call. If you're not worried about other warriors, or you're not worried about Engies, or you're not worried about Ellies, you can switch out Sigil of Doom and go for Strength. Well, not Strength. I wouldn't recommend that, actually. But go for Geomancy or the Hydromancy. Those or the Air. They'll do pretty decent DPS for you, and it's a good resolution. But I find Sigil of Doom to be quite valuable, especially in 1v1 situations. So that's basically it for the gear. We'll go over the traits next. All right, so for this build, the trait spread is 20606. In Strength, we take Dual Wielding for the additional 5% damage when we eviscerate, and when we just attack in general with our axe, or do the rip from the Impale. 5% might not seem like much, but in SPVP, any edge matters, and the 100 power you get from having 2 in Strength plus the 5%, you do hit quite a bit harder, and it does matter. In defense, since we have Hullbrick runes, we don't need to take Dogged March here to deal with snares. So you can take sure-footed, and since we're going to be using 3 stances as our utilities, sure-footed is pretty great. Increasing Berserker stance to 10 seconds is insanely good. That gives you a 10-second window of immunity against condition damage classes. And with the amount of damage that this build can dish out in 10 seconds, you should have a huge advantage in any 1v1 fight against a condition damage class. It makes balance stance last longer, more swiftness, more stability, and makes endure pain last a second longer, which is also quite beneficial. Cleansing Ire is gain adrenaline when hit, remove a condition for every bar of adrenaline spent. Cleansing Ire is, obviously, as anyone knows about Warrior, it's quite good. It's going to cure your conditions. It's going to help you build up adrenaline faster. It's just really good. Cleansing Ire is probably the one trait that makes Warrior even usable whatsoever in PvE, or not PvE, PvP in World v World as well. I couldn't imagine Warrior being the tier it's at in PvP without this trait, so it's pretty darn OP. And then lastly, we take Defy Pain. Getting the extra endure pain, even on a long cooldown of 60 seconds, is strong. Like I said, this build doesn't have the greatest escapability and mobility out of combat. So having an extra way to survive fights that are going wrong is wonderful, and I highly recommend that everyone take that trait as a result. Additionally, if you know you're fighting against an enemy power build and you're at about 50% health, you can pop your Endure Pain. You'll have 5 seconds of immunity. You'll become vulnerable again. You'll probably get hit. This will kick in. So you're really looking at a 10-second window where you're immune to a power build, which compares very favorably to Berserker stance as it is against condition builds. So with the same similar window of 10 seconds of invulnerability, you should be in a position to really turn the table or win the fight against a power build with those 2 traits. In Discipline, a lot of the traits are important. We'll go through. The minor trait, Versatile Rage, gain adrenaline on a weapon swap. This is key because we are playing a burst build, and you want to be able to gain your adrenaline back to full as fast as possible, and this little trait is great for that. I suggest taking Warrior Sprint, moving faster while wielding melee weapon, because moving slow is bad, and you're not always going to have swiftness, so this is good. Fast Hands, as everyone who plays Warrior knows, Fast Hands is ridiculously OP. The recharge of your cooldowns means you're basically going to get to burst in this build on cooldown. Fast Hands combos really well with Versatile Rage. It combos really well with the Grandmaster minor trait, Versatile Power, which gives you might on weapon swap. This trait alone is worth basically about 2.5 stacks of might, which in this build, which goes a really long way. We'll skip over the Master trait and go right to the Grandmaster trait, which is what makes this build tick. Burst Mastery. The burst skills cost 33% less, which means that if you have full adrenaline and you use your burst skill, you'll still have a bar of adrenaline left, which combined with Versatile Rage and Cleansing Ire means you can get back to your full burst very quickly and burst again. Additionally, it gives 7% damage increase when you eviscerate. These things are going to mean that even in a build with a Celestial Amulet, your eviscerates are going to hit very, very hard, even against heavy armored targets. Lastly, in Major, this is a variable trait. I take Signet's Recharge Faster for solo queues and hot joins, where I'm going to be doing more 1v1 stuff. In Organized Team Queue, I would change it out for Destruction of the Empowered, for reasons that I'll discuss in a minute. But in Organized Team Queues, the 3% increase per boon on your target for Destruction of the Empowered is super strong. You really, in team PvP, want to burst down your targets very quickly, and the targets that you want to burst down are likely going to have boons on them. So this makes your eviscerates and everything hit super hard, and it's a great skill. But for the most part, when you're just worrying about yourself in solo queues or hot joins, and you're in a lot of 1v1 situations, Signet Mastery is kind of superior. So next I will make a few comments on playstyle and we'll wrap up. So how does the build work? The idea is to put pressure on your opponents with condition damage from Torment, from Burning, and from Bleeding. And then just peppering them with your auto attacks on axe or longbow. Just putting general pressure on them. Then when the time is right, when you have decent amount of might, when they're a little bit under pressure, you can tell they've used a cooldown or two, swap to axe and do a big eviscerate, preferably right after you land a pin down. If they're immobilized for 3¼ seconds, they can't dodge. So that means your eviscerate will hit. So you basically want, the dream scenario is to see them use their healing skill, knowing that they've popped their heal and they don't have another heal. Pin them down so they can't dodge, swap, eviscerate them, and hopefully they're dead. If they're still alive, they're going to be running very soon. So that's when you want to hit them with Impale and watch the Torment finish them. And then just keep pressuring them with your auto attack. That is the dream scenario. Obviously, not every fight is going to be that smooth or that clean, but it will actually work out like that fairly often, where you'll get to do that if you manage your rotations and you get used to it and you think about playing it the right way. I discussed the utility skills a bit earlier, so one thing that I see a lot of people do is if they know that their opponents are going to have heavy amounts of CC, which happens a lot more in organized PvP, TPvP and higher level solo queues, they'll go double stability, because oftentimes being able to stay on a point or getting a res off matters more than just surviving for a little bit longer. So what you'll see is people take Doliac Signet, go for the double stability, and it will give them better game in team fights than the Endure Pain does. A bit more utility there. If you do that, you just should be aware that you are not personally as tanky anymore, especially against power builds. Additionally, like I said earlier when I was discussing the traits, the Signet of Rage is swappable with Battle Standard. Battle Standard is great for team fights. If you're doing organized team PvP, I highly recommend you take Battle Standard, because dropping a Battle Standard at a key time is going to win you team fights and turn the tide of battles. And if you win a big team fight at mid, thanks to your Battle Standard, it is a huge boost in carrying your team to the win. In hot joins, you don't need Battle Standard. You probably don't want Battle Standard. In solo queues even, it's not the greatest, because if your team was getting trounced at mid and you can't count on any of them, rezzing them might not be the best bet. You might be better off playing a little bit more selfishly and taking Signet of Rage. Additionally, if you have to also think about what your team needs you to do. If you are a roamer and they have you roaming and pressuring far, Signet of Rage is going to be pretty good. It's definitely an elite skill that benefits roamers. If you are going to be team fighting or being near point and mid roaming, you might want Battle Standard, just because the reses will come in more handy. So it's really not only the type of PvP you're doing, but also the role that your team needs you to fulfill. So it's a lot of just looking at the situation and picking accordingly based on what you need. So that's basically it. I'm sure people will have some questions. I will be happy to answer them in the comments. The remainder of the video is going to be gameplay footage of me dueling some of the more popular specs in the PvP meta, and showing you how the build plays against some of the popular builds out there. Hopefully you guys will get a good idea for how the build plays from watching those. So thank you guys for watching, and again, any comments, leave them below and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks guys.